The scene transitioned to a round table where an observer reported the failed assassination to a group of high-ranking officials. The council members were visibly disturbed, struggling to understand how Frank and the two knights had failed. They turned their suspicions toward the spy, accusing him of underestimating the mission by assuming it would be simple. The spy, clearly uneasy, admitted that Ghislain was the reason for their failure. The council demanded to know who the spy intended to use for the duel. The spy named Cain Loges, a young warrior renowned for his brute strength and powerful swordsmanship. He was considered a symbol of sheer force, unmatched by anyone in the north. The spy claimed that arranging a duel would be simple, as Cain was Ghislain's cousin. The man seated on the throne fixed the spy with a piercing glare and warned him that there would be no more chances if he failed again. The spy solemnly promised not to disappoint. The scene then shifted to the training hall of the Perdium estate, where Fergus entered and informed his master it was time to eat. Just as he spoke, something whizzed past him, a sword. Ghislain had been practicing with his mana thread and had wrapped it around the sword near the doorway, pulling it toward himself. He was closely monitoring his movements, testing his control over the thread as he swung the sword. Fergus approached and apologized for interrupting. Curious, he asked how Ghislain had moved the sword. Ghislain revealed the thin mana thread and explained it was a technique used to manipulate mana like a string. He shared that he had relied on this skill often in his previous life. However, due to his current limited mana, he had to implode his core to use the ability effectively. He added that with his current constraints, he could only produce a few threads at a time. Fergus, clearly impressed, admitted he had never seen anything like it, even with his training in mana control. He was baffled that someone he had once considered weak and untrained could perform such a sophisticated technique. Sensing Fergus lingering, Ghislain asked if he needed something else. Fergus explained that he had come to deliver some news. Bowing his head, he sincerely thanked Ghislain for protecting his younger sister. Ghislain, caught off guard by the gesture, humbly responded that he had only done what was necessary and invited Fergus to share a meal with him. The next day, the festival was temporarily suspended, as expected, following the scandal involving a knight's attempt to traffic the young noblewoman. Inside the castle, Elena vented her frustration to her brother, upset that no one believed her when she said he had saved her. She urged Ghislain to speak out and clarify the truth, but he assured her it wasn't worth it. People wouldn't believe him either. Belinda, overhearing the exchange, was visibly annoyed. She expressed her disgust toward Jamal and Philip, claiming she had always suspected the knights of being depraved and accusing them of trying to use Elena for their own purposes. Ghislain, meanwhile, felt a sense of relief that his sister was safe. Although he had averted an imminent war, he knew their enemies would not be so easily deterred. Aware that he couldn't face the coming threats alone, Ghislain realized he needed to form his own military force. As he contemplated his next move, a maid entered the room with a cart of food. She placed a dish in front of him, and when Ghislain lifted the cover, he found only a single slice of bread. Puzzled, he turned to Belinda and asked when dessert would be served. The maid, shocked by the question, asked if he truly didn't understand how dire their situation had become. Before Ghislain could reply, loud shouting outside the castle caught his attention. He froze, alarmed by the sudden uproar. At the castle gates, a stout, bearded man was angrily demanding that the Perdium household compensate him for the financial losses caused by the abrupt cancellation of the festival. He wasn't alone. Other men had gathered alongside him, wielding pitchforks and echoing similar complaints. They shouted for Ghislain and Elena to appear, accusing them of squandering the county's funds. The guards urged the crowd to stay calm, but tension continued to rise. Watching from a window, Ghislain tried to make sense of the situation, puzzled by the cause of the outrage. Belinda, standing nearby, filled him in. She explained that the county's economy was heavily reliant on merchants who made most of their earnings during the annual festival. While last year's event had been a financial success, the abrupt cancellation of this year's festival had left many of them in financial distress, fueling their anger. Ghislain was shocked. He hadn't realized how fragile the region's economy had become. Seeing how the situation could quickly spiral out of control, Ghislain decided he needed to act. He turned to Fergus and asked what the soldiers were doing, instructing him to send troops to calm the mob. But Fergus gave him more bad news. There were no soldiers available. Ghislain was stunned. Fergus explained that most of their forces had been sent to the monster-infested forest to assist with rebuilding after a recent orc attack. With frustration building, Ghislain took in the grim reality. The Perdium territory was constantly under pressure, caught between barbarian raids from the north and monster threats from the forest. The challenges of leading the county were becoming more overwhelming by the day. As the weight of the crisis sank in, no troops, no funds, Ghislain pulled Belinda aside and reminded her that managing the household's finances was her responsibility. Ghislain asked Belinda to use whatever funds remained to help pacify the merchants. To his shock, Belinda informed him that there was no money left. Dumbfounded, Ghislain demanded to know why. She reminded him that the Count had cut off his allowance due to his history of reckless spending. Now realizing he was completely broke, Ghislain desperately asked if Belinda could lend him any money, but she admitted she didn't have any either. The scene shifted to Ghislain gazing out the window at the town below. His mind raced as he tried to process how his once powerful family had reached such a desperate state. Even with his knowledge of the future, he felt powerless without resources. He began thinking about whether anything on the estate could potentially turn their fortunes around. Just then, Ricardo burst into the room, panting from exertion. Startled, Ghislain asked what was going on. Ricardo, clearly anxious, informed him that there was trouble. Cain had come and wanted to see him. The name alone left Ghislain stunned. The scene then cut to Scoven, who was barely staying on his feet. Bruised and battered, he took another brutal hit that shattered his chest plate and sent him crashing to the ground. Ghislain arrived at the tavern just in time to witness his commander fall. Weakly, Scoven called out to him. Irritated by the sight, Ghislain turned his focus to Cain, who greeted him with a broad grin. Towering before him was the imposing figure of Cain Loges, heir to Loges County.